My computer is being really weird today. So let me go through with you guys a couple of last minute things I need to check off. Your final grades I will probably have for you on December 12th. So if you do your exam on December 11th, then I'll get in the morning on December 12th, which is a Thursday, I believe. And is that the right day? Let me make sure that I have. Let's see. The 11th is a Thursday. Then on the 12th, I guess, is when I will tally up all of the grades, and I'll release them so that you guys will have some time to check them over and make sure that everything is done correctly. So that's a Friday, and so your exam is on Thursday the 11th, and let's see what else we got. So I was going through the Chapter 14 homework questions with one of the students, and her and I discovered that two of the answers were wrong for the questions in Chapter 14, and so I'm going to give everybody who did Chapter 14 2 extra points, just because we managed to figure out that the book was wrong on two of those. We also figured out how to release the homework so that you guys would be able to view them. So I think if you go to Springboard and you go to your quizzes, now you can see for Chapter 14 what you got wrong and what you got right. And so I also extended Chapter 15 homework questions. When did I make them until? Let's see. It was due yesterday, but I only had like 35 people that did it, and so.
At 4:30, you extended it to 11:30.
I think I extended it again until 11:30 tonight. And so then tomorrow when I come in, let me mark that for myself. I'll do release of Chapter 15 questions, so that way you can see what you got wrong and what you got right on the homework questions. So hopefully that'll help you study a little better. And I'll go back and look at those and make sure that there isn't any wrong, or if you notice that there are some that are wrong, like between what you put and what the book puts, then I'll definitely give everybody the points for that. And so I also released the final homework, which is Chapter 16. I made it due Sunday at 11:30 p.m. So that you get one more chance to get some extra points. And I need to go through and count up how many points. Count how many points were available, so that I can tell you, like, if there were 100 points available, I'll make it something like if you got 70 points, then you get 100% for homework. So I'll need to go through and figure out exactly how many points you had and what the number of points is that's available. So I'll do that, and then I also put up another one of the drop boxes. So we had 4 quiz scores. We had quiz 1, which we did on my website. We had quiz 2, which were the notes over Tuesday, November 11th. We have quiz 3, which is the notes from 11/25. And what is today? Oh, today's 12/4. Okay. And then for today, quiz 4, you can submit either the notes from 12/02 or from today, 12/04. And so hopefully you'll have both, because I see some similar faces. You guys are usually the ones that are here. So if you want to submit them from Tuesday, or you want to submit them from today, that will give you plenty of points for that. So since there were 4 quiz grades and they were 10 points apiece, I'm going to make it so that if you got 3 out of the 4, that'll be 100% for the quizzes. So I need to figure out how many points are available for homework, and I'm going to do the best 3 out of 4 quizzes will equal 100. Does that make sense?
So does that mean we don't have to do the last quiz if we already got 100?
Yeah, if you already got 100, you don't have to submit it, but yeah. Let's see what else. I am in the middle of doing your study guide. I've already made it through chapter 14 and chapter 15, and I hope I'll finish chapter 16 tonight. Then I'll be able to put up let me make that my 8th thing on my to-do list. Put up study guide. So I've got that study guide for you for your final exam, and I think that is everything. Do any of you guys have any questions or anything for right now? Okay, so I don't know why I'm clicking on that and it's not doing anything. All right, so today is our last class. For some of you, you'll say, yay. Is this anybody's last class forever? Is it yours? Yay! Woo! So are you graduating here in December? Oh, I thought you were graduating. Oh, man. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get you all that excited. Man. You know, one of the things that was the weirdest thing for me getting my doctorate is, I sat there in my final class and I was like, this is the last class that I ever have to take. I mean, as far as you can possibly go. And I think that was really weird for me because I don't know what to do with myself when I have spare time. It seems so strange. Okay, so getting into this final lecture, we're going to finish up chapter 16, and we won't make it through everything in chapter 16, but we will make it through most of this. And so we've been talking a little bit about biodiversity and how things differ across the globe depending on where they're located, close to the equator or far from the equator, depending on the temperature, depending on the amount of precipitation. And so looking at island biogeography, which is basically what types of living things live in different places around the world, helps us to understand the maintenance and the loss of biodiversity. So something kind of funny about that is my son's in there playing with his Penguins of Madagascar toy. And Madagascar is one of those big islands that we study biodiversity on because it's got such a neat range of creatures that live there. So one of the first really kind of, I don't want to say the first experiments or the most controversial experiments, but this was an experiment that's very famous in the biology field because E.O. Wilson, who's still alive today, very famous biologist, they went out to this one island. I'm not sure exactly where it is in the world, but they went out and they covered this island with scaffolding and they exterminated every living thing from the island. And they also basically killed everything on the island, all the insects, and they did this on 7 other tiny islands. And then they looked at how things would recolonize or come back to form the living things on these other tiny islands. So basically testing the theory of island biogeography. And we used to do a lab when I first came here. I was trying to make this lab work where we had these blue kiddie pools, and I had students make islands out of sand, and then we would release crickets and see how far they could make it between the different islands and whether it was better to have big islands or small islands. But what basically ended up happening was that I had thousands of crickets in this building. They had escaped, and so students would be sitting out in the hall and there'd be crickets running down the hall. And so the university told me no more of that experiment because they had to fumigate the building because I basically released crickets everywhere. So interesting to see how they different insects go about recolonizing an island when there's nothing there to begin with. So in this theory of island biogeography, this basically looks at and predicts patterns of species diversity on islands. It's got two different effects. So there's a close relationship between the number of species inhabiting an island and the island's area. So that should make sense to you. The bigger the island is, the more possibility there is to have different types of species. And then there's also the distance effect. So how close they are to one another is going to make the number of species change. So this island that's very close to the mainland is going to have species that are very much like the mainland, and then how far it is to the next island is going to have fewer species, and then the next island is going to have even fewer species. So the two things that affect island biogeography: size of the islands and distance from the mainland. And so that's kind of hard to read. In island recolonization, so think of like the colonies of species that are on these islands. It basically says that the closer islands are going to recolonize more quickly. So the closer they are, the less amount of ocean between these islands, the quicker the recolonization is going to happen, because the closer you are, the faster the insects can move between the islands. And then on all of the islands, the number of insect species after fumigation, so after they went through and basically killed all of the insects on the island, returned to about the same number of insect species prior to fumigation. So basically, we know that islands can support a certain number of insects, and so the amount of insects after colonization or after recolonization is going to be about the same as the ones before colonization. And the composition of these insects on each island changed over the course of study, even on the two control islands. So not just human manipulation, but the way that nature manipulates things. The composition of these insects, so the number of flying insects, the number of crawling insects, the number of burrowing insects, it's going to change whether humans have something to do with it or not. And so we know the Earth is constantly changing. Humans just have an interesting control over that. So after we have that island where they've fumigated everything, one of the interesting things about biodiversity is that when we have extinction of certain types of species, especially these large mammal species like tigers and jaguars and lions, as we lose the bigger mammals, we're also going to lose insect species, plant species. So when one thing goes extinct, a lot of the other things are going to go extinct as well. So there are multiple reasons for this. The passenger pigeon, if you ever remember in your history classes, reading about how they used to tie these little notes to pigeon legs, and then they would send them out to go fly the message to a destination. There used to be millions of these passenger pigeons, but they were hunted to extinction because it was something that that humans really like to eat. So you can see here they've got all these pigeons hung up. And so we as humans have a big role in the extinction of modern species. And they actually had the last passenger pigeon on Earth, named Martha, died at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. So imagine taking care of the last of this species on Earth. We see that happen in a lot of different zoos where they've got the last set of the gene pool before the genes go extinct. So here's one, the passenger pigeon. And we have two different types of extinctions. We've seen this graph before where we talked about there's always I don't want to say small amount, there's always extinctions that are going on, but in the history of the Earth, we've seen 5 mass extinctions where large number of species and even entire families become extinct, like the dinosaurs. And this happens in a very short period of time and due to a sudden environmental change. And so down here, these green ones are the background extinctions, the ones that are, there's always stuff that's going extinct. They run out of food, their territory gets destroyed, something happens with a disease or infection, they lose their food source, there's a predator that really likes to eat them. So we always have extinctions that are going on. But every once in a while, we have these huge events where 99% of the species get wiped out. And so it's estimated that we are going through the 6th mass extinction right now. And who do you think has their hands in this one? So those 5 that have happened before had nothing to do with humans because humans weren't around then. But the one that's happening right now is due to a large part to humans having a role in that. So some of these factors that influence the risk of background extinction, why are things always going extinct? One can be because of geographic range. So is it having an extensive geographic range? Like can it hang out all throughout Australia and the bottom of Asia? Or if you're on one little tiny island and you're very restricted, then it's much more likely that a species can go extinct because it's much more vulnerable. When it's got a very small range, a very small territory, it's at a much bigger risk of going extinct. It also depends on the local population size. So if you have tons of individuals, tons of frogs, then it's not very likely that they're going to go extinct. But if you only have a very small population, like imagine Galapagos tortoises. There aren't very many Galapagos tortoises on the Earth, and they have a very small population, so they are at an increased risk of going extinct because there's so few of them. And then also habitat tolerance. If you can tolerate lots of places in the habitat, if you have a broad habitat tolerance, then it's not so likely you're going to go extinct. But if you have a narrow habitat tolerance, meaning you have to live in one very tiny place, then you're at a greater risk of extinction than species with broader habitat tolerances. You also would have seen that due to when we did Lab 10, the one that had the macroinvertebrates, where certain things like worms and snails, they can live in any type of water, but a mayfly or a dragonfly has to live in really good water, otherwise it runs the risk of dying due to pollution. That would be a narrow habitat tolerance. So as I said before, we're in the middle of a mass extinction right now. Current rates of extinction in every well-studied group of plants and animals support the hypothesis that a mass extinction is already underway. So as biologists are going out and studying all the living things on Earth, we know that things are becoming extinct very, very quickly. And this mass extinction seems to be the result of the activities of one species, and that would be due to us. We're driving things out of their habitats, we're polluting the environment, we are using the resources. We have a really big hand in things that are going extinct. Here's one example. If you usually like the big thing that we think of when we think of humans doing harm to the environment is the destruction of the rainforests. So deforestation is something that we as humans are doing that's destroying tons of species out there. We're losing biodiversity because things that live in here cannot live after all of the trees have been removed. And so we have really damaged the environment. We see that our closest living relatives, the bonobos, the type of primate, has been driven to extinction. And part of that, you know, we wouldn't ever think of eating a monkey or eating a primate, but a lot of the African and Asian tribes actively hunt these and eat these. And so they are losing their habitat very quickly, and humans are hunting them for food. And so they are very close to extinction, and scientists are doing the best they can to collect them in zoos so that their gene pool isn't wiped out forever. So human interference generally reduces biodiversity. When we go through and we slash land so that we can build our buildings or build our roads or highways, build our cities, or have grazing land for cattle, land for agriculture, we are not just destroying one or two species, we're often reducing huge swaths of biodiversity as we go through and slash and burn. So some ecosystem disturbances are reversible, but others are not. Like when we talked about the Bath Nature Preserve in the lab, there was one part, the North Fork of the Yellow Creek, where they had the pristine, beautiful stream, and then Bath Creek, which was the one that was channelized, where they went through and they dug it out with a backhoe and took out all the rocks and just made it a big, murky, algae-ridden mess. We try to reverse these things as we realize that biodiversity is so important, and sometimes we can bring back the local populations, but most of the time there's no way to do that. So once the land is cultivated or developed, like think of going out and cutting down rainforest to have an area for cows to graze. Once we cultivate it or develop it, can it ever return to its natural state? It's likely going to be recolonized, but it's never going to be exactly like what it was before. So when we talked last time about succession, where if we had a volcano come in and cover everything in lava, the first thing that would come back are the mosses and the seeds and the grasses. Then the next step is we would have shrubs and small plants, and then eventually we get small trees, and then after hundreds of years we have large trees. Ecological succession is where either naturally or artificially we're trying to return the Earth to its pristine environment, but it never exactly works the way that we want it to. So here's an example of something that humans didn't have anything to do with. So we see this happening in nature, whether humans have something to do with it or not. In May of 1980, this mountain was just sitting there doing its thing, and then in September of 1980, this huge crater blew off of the mountain, realizing it was a volcano, and the heat and the lava came and destroyed everything in its path. Here we see the beautiful trees, and then as the lava flowed out, it destroyed everything around it. And then look at how long it took for it to even start to go through succession, starting to have the tiny mosses and the grasses coming back in. So what is that, 31 years? So 31 years till we even start to see the tiniest bit of life that's returning to this area. So this disturbance is an example of something that's reversible because it's not polluted. It's not like we poisoned the area. It was simply everything got mowed down by lava, and now things are starting to come back. But some disturbances are going to be irreversible. So in Tasmania, down by Australia, the Tasmanian wolf, we saw the last of that species go extinct, I believe, back in the 70s. The Chinese river dolphin used to be that in freshwater these dolphins would be swimming around. It's gone extinct. The blue whale, which is the largest mammal that we have anywhere around the earth, is endangered because people like to hunt for these and take them for meat, take them for blubber. And once these species are lost, the species, it says a species will never exist again. But it's interesting, if you've ever watched the Discovery Channel, they're trying to bring back the woolly mammoths and the mastodons by taking those genes that they found, I think it was in Russia, up in Siberia, where they found a complete intact woolly mammoth frozen in the permafrost, in the snow. So they took and they dug all around it and removed the woolly mammoth from the ice with a helicopter. And so they pulled it up, and when they got in there, they were able to find the woolly mammoth genes. And so they're trying to basically create a clone where they could impregnate an elephant, a very distant cousin, and at some point this elephant may give birth to a woolly mammoth. So once it's lost, this isn't exactly true. A species will never exist again, because if we have the genes, we may be able to genetically engineer it to return. But the blue whale, how would we ever get a blue whale to return when there's nothing that's big enough to be a surrogate for a blue whale? So if it's lost, it will probably... Okay. Who is it? Oh.
Who is it?
Hey, Angela, I'm sorry. My son answered the phone and I'm in the middle of class. Can I call you back? Okay. Thanks so much. Okay, bye. Thank you, son. Okay. So, I don't know what was going on with that. Disruptions of ecosystems can be disastrous. For example, if we have the introduction of an exotic species, like an invasive species, or something that's not supposed to be there. On Tuesday, I talked about this example, where these monk parakeets were imported from South America up to Chicago, and some of them escaped and were able to actually start a breeding colony. And they are a nuisance because they build these huge nests at the top of these electrical poles, and when they do this, they often cause the wires to break, the poles to fall down, the transformers to blow out. And so something that was never meant to exist in Chicago was able to survive, and now they are such a nuisance because they're destroying the city. And so what are you going to do to get rid of them? Another example of an exotic species that's introduced is the brown tree snake. What's up? You can. So an example of this, let me move to the next slide. Here we've got our brown tree snake. This was introduced to the island of Guam, which is down, I believe, near Puerto Rico. And these brown tree snakes love to eat birds. And so once they got to Guam, the native species of birds had no idea what hit them. All of a sudden, these brown tree snakes, which had never been there before, started preying on the local birds, and they didn't have any defense mechanism against these brown tree snakes. So the brown tree snakes will just keep eating the birds until eventually either there's no birds left or they get rid of these brown tree snakes. We also see this happening with different types of plants. This is the purple loosestrife, introduced in the United States as a garden plant. So somebody said, oh, this is a beautiful purple flower. I'll come plant it in my garden. And what happened is that it escaped from cultivation, and it has invaded the wetlands. So it is everywhere in every state in the United States except for Florida. And why is that a problem? You know, they're very beautiful, but they outgrow the native grasses. So imagine if you're a species that's eating the native grasses. If you don't eat this, then when your grasses are gone, you are out of a food source. It also kills off sedges and other types of flowering plants. If you kill off the flowering plants, then the things that depend on them, like honeybees, there's nothing for the honeybees to go in and get as far as nectar goes. And so if we lose bees, we're going to be in deep trouble. And we've started to see that because natural bee populations are on the decline right now because of the invasive species, the African killer bees. Here we see another one, the zebra mussel. This is a big problem in Lake Erie because it's invaded the Great Lakes. It was brought in on the hulls of ships that were traveling through the Great Lakes, and it causes damage to our industrial facilities. So people that are releasing wastewater into the Great Lakes, these guys go up in those water intake pipes and completely shut them out from being able to intake the water. They also deplete the resources for small fish, eliminate the food supply for larger game fish. So just one species coming in affects all the species below it and all the species above it. So these were all accidents. Nobody could have predicted that this was going to happen. But we do have some cases where we brought in species hoping that they would do one thing, and they've done something completely different. So this is one of my favorite examples. It's called a cane toad, and there was actually an entire movie made about cane toads, because what happened was there was agricultural pests in Australia, so these insects that were destroying crops. So these farmers thought that they could bring in these cane toads and that they would eat all of the agricultural pests. And what happened was that these cane toads ate everything in their path. And they ate all of the insects. The populations exploded. Nothing was able to kill them because these are the type of toads that have poison glands on their back. So what was happening is people's pets were finding these toads, and like the dogs would pick them up, and then the dog would die. And so nothing could go in and eat these cane toads, and they would eat everything in their path. And so these became this ecological nightmare. In the film, Cane Toads Are Coming, you see people out there and they're shooting them and they're collecting them in nets and they're hitting them with baseball bats and they're purposefully running them over with their cars, trying to kill off as many as they can because these guys are everywhere. And so they're killing indigenous snakes, so the local snake population, lizard population, birds, crocodiles, family pets. One of the other things that's a problem with these cane toads is that, so they have that poison gland on their back. Humans found that if they smoked that they could get high from it. And so they were having problems with basically drug abuse where they were using these, you know, like you've heard of the toad licking, like people that lick them to get high? That's exactly what's happening. I used to have a couple of these toads in my lab over there. I think that they're fascinating.
Mom, I actually saw a show about them.
I did show you the show about them one time.
And like a lady smacked them, and one time the frog got over and poison shot into her eye, and she can't see well.
All right, that's enough. You go back. That story could go on for a long time. So disrupting these different types of ecosystems can be disastrous because you never know exactly what an invasive species is going to do when it gets into these areas. Another way that ecosystems are disrupted is through acid rain and the burning of fossil fuels. So humans, as they are polluting the environment and causing the water to become more acidic, acid rain is destroying a lot of plants and a lot of the small animal species. And as we are burning fossil fuels, we're causing more carbon dioxide to go up into the atmosphere, which causes problems for lots of different types of species. And so if you ever hear about the controversial idea of global warming, at this time it's called climate change because it's causing these huge weather events around the globe, and that has been shown to be directly attributed to humans and the things that we're doing to the environment. And so I think this is the same slide that I had before. Burning fossil fuels and clearing land to cultivate crops has greatly increased the greenhouse gases. So when you did your carbon footprint, your ecological footprint, you could see that these greenhouse gases are causing the temperatures to go up, which is causing our polar ice caps to melt. And so what are we trying to do? Reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, like putting in solar panels, using nuclear energy, using sustainable resources like wind and water. So trying to reduce the pollution that we're putting out there. And so what is generally happening? In 1979, it used to be that the South Pole, is this the South Pole or the North Pole? Well, this is Greenland, so this is the North Pole. Used to be that there was huge areas of ice, and as it started to melt, we've started to see lots of species losing their habitats, the really sad things like the polar bears and the penguins and the seals. And so that has been one of the most obvious examples of how we are harming our environment. So these biological systems are also showing the effect of climate change. So we've seen trees and flower species are being reduced. We've seen migratory birds, their patterns of migration has changed. We've seen that birds and butterflies, that they are changing around the globe because they're not able to withstand these huge shifts in our climate. And another way that our disruption of the ecosystem can be disastrous is through the deletion of the ozone layer, which is basically what's protecting us from the solar energy that's coming down from the sun. So it's kind of interesting to think that the one thing that we ultimately depend upon for our energy, which is the energy from the sun, is also eventually going to kill us. As the ozone layer depletes, we're seeing lots of cancer and lots of change in the climate. So increased levels of ultraviolet light. So ultraviolet light is the thing that is coming from the sun and causes problems here on the Earth's surface, causes health problems, not just in humans, but in animals that don't have any way of defending themselves from the UV light. We also see decreased rates of photosynthesis in plants. So the reason we have this happening is because of chlorofluorocarbons leaking into the atmosphere. Not so much anymore, but I think it used to be back in the 70s that they put CFCs into things that were in spray cans. So if you used like Aquanet hairspray or any type of spray had chlorofluorocarbons in it, and as those were being released into the environment, they cause a breakdown of the ozone layer. And so that's one of the reasons the EPA or the Environmental Protection Agency is going to have regulations about the emission of chlorofluorocarbons, because they don't want us to destroy our ozone layer, or the very thing that we depend on for our energy will eventually kill us. So here is where we see ozone depletion happen the greatest in the Antarctic. And so it used to be that there was a small hole in the ozone layer back in September of 1979, and then as humans started using chlorofluorocarbons, we didn't know that we were destroying the ozone layer, and so 10 years later we see this huge hole in the ozone layer. And then we start trying to do something about it, but we've already made that damage to the ozone layer, so it kept getting bigger and getting bigger. And we didn't know that we were doing this to the environment, and there was no way to stop it once we had started doing it. So depletion of the ozone layer and the formation of an ozone hole over the Earth's polar regions has occurred because humans have done that to the ozone layer. And so one of the things people say is, well, who cares? Like, we'll come up with better sunscreens, or it won't really matter. But it does actually matter. Products that are made from ozone-depleting chlorofluorocarbons, it used to be that if you went to McDonald's and you got a Big Mac, it would come in this styrofoam container. And we don't see styrofoam so much anymore because styrofoam is this, has CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons that really destroy our ozone layer. So the thing that we thought was helping us, that styrofoam containers were something that we use to keep our food, had these damaging propellants and really hurt our environment. So we try and have regulations against these things so that we don't destroy our ozone layer. The final one, the disruption of the ecosystem that's disastrous, is the deforestation of the tropical rainforests. So we're seeing countless species are starting to become endangered, and this increases as we have concentrations of greenhouse gases in our environment. The problem is we need that land for agriculture. We're using the trees for logging. We are going in and we want to get gold out of the gold mines, so we build highways and take big trucks and things through the rainforest to get to the gold. And those areas also have oil in them, so as we try to build oil wells, we start to see tons of pollution happening. So these things make people a lot of money. And so when you try and tell people like, oh, you shouldn't harm the environment while you're attempting to do these things, they say, well, look at my bottom line. They want to try and make as much money as possible. So the EPA puts regulations on these biodiversity killers, and they're trying to keep the tropical rainforests from being slashed and burned or logged where the trees can't come back. But it's a very difficult thing to do because a lot of times in these areas the people are very poor and they see money getting thrown at them so that people can go in and put up gold mines, and they see this as their way to get out of poverty, but it ends up destroying the environment in the meantime. And so the deforestation of these tropical rainforests, before humans came in and started affecting them, all of these regions had tropical rainforests. And then as you see down here, because of the human impact, we've gone in and we've slashed these forests. And the places where we have the most biodiversity, we're starting to lose those places. And so we'll lose the resources that go along with those. So destroying the tropical rainforest has two serious environmental impacts. First of all, reducing the amount of species, so trees, flowers, insects, birds, mammals, and also these tropical rainforests, all of the photosynthesis that's happening in the tropical rainforest is important so that we get the oxygen, and as we are destroying those rainforests, we're having more and more of the greenhouse gases, like the carbon dioxide, that stay in our atmosphere, which makes it less healthy for everything that breathes the oxygen. And so one of the things that we attempt to do is we attempt to use sustainable agriculture. So cutting down things like bamboo. You may have heard that people use bamboo in their hardwood floors now instead of the big trees, the oak and the cedar, because bamboo is very easy to replenish. It grows back really quickly. And we are going in and we're attempting to plant new trees in the rainforest in an attempt to undo this damage that we've done to the rainforest. And who knows if we'll be successful in our lifetime. So the best thing that we can do is attempt to cut off these environment destroying activities before they ever happen. So we try to develop these strategies to effectively conserve the environment that we have. But with limited resources, conservation takes a lot of money. We have to prioritize which species it is that we're going to save. Are we trying to save the giant pandas? Are we trying to save the lions and the tigers and the big mammal species? Or should we instead try to save things like bacteria? Bacteria, we don't see them. We don't think about them very often. Pandas, obviously, is the World Wildlife Federation uses them as their mascot. And people think, oh, I'd love to save the big, beautiful pandas. But it might be better for our environment if we save bacteria. But who's going to give money to save bacteria? Nobody wants to do that. So deciding what species get saved, you know, we hear about this all the time, like they're going out to build a new gas or oil well, but there's a species of minnow in a stream that they don't want to get killed off. And so this has brought a lot of money into the legal business, so suing people and suing land and suing companies that destroy the environment. It's become big business to be a lawyer. And so do we preserve these species because we love them and we think that they're so beautiful? And in preserving species, we also have to preserve their habitat. Species can't live in isolation. They have to have some place to live. And so in order to go through these conservation efforts, in protecting like an orangutan species, we have to protect their environment as well. And so protecting the rainforest is just as important as preserving these different species. And so this is where we come to the end. Thank you guys for a wonderful semester, and I have enjoyed having you all in here. I will be sending out an email when I get the study guide done, and if you have any grade issues, start looking through those. Thank you guys for everything, and good luck on all of your finals, and good luck. I'll see you around campus.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. I salute you too.
Are all the grades posted, or are you still working on the homework and stuff?
I am still working on